are disseminated. And if you then prosecute Joseph Goebbels for genocide or for incitement to genocide, I would not argue that he is entitled to be defended on the basis of freedom of speech. Actually, the Nuremberg court confronted such a situation because one of the defendants before the Nuremberg court was Streicher, the publisher of Die Stürmer, which was the leading anti-Semitic newspaper in Germany. And the Streicher case was somewhat complicated because Die Stürmer, his newspaper, was a very widely distributed publication in the period before the Nazis took full control, when there was a general free speech situation in Germany at the time of the Weimar Republic. It actually declined in circulation greatly. The Nuremberg tribunal upheld the conviction of Streicher for what he did during the war itself. Its jurisdiction was essentially what happened during the war. And he was executed because he was, from their standpoint, engaged in incitement to genocide during a period when only the Nazi point of view was able to be heard. The Streicher case has caused a great deal of debate subsequently. Telford Taylor, who was the chief American prosecutor at Nuremberg, or in the subsequent trials, ultimately wrote that he believed Streicher should have been convicted. He didn't believe that Streicher should have been executed for the crime. But essentially, that crime, the incitement to genocide in circumstances where only that point of view can be heard, is the analog to Rwanda, and there I don't defend something on free speech grounds. If you take incitement to genocide, let's say that somebody publishes something here in Oslo or in London or in New York where opposite points of view or many different points of view can be heard, then it seems to me an entirely different circumstance, and one would want to give a greater degree of protection for freedom of speech in those circumstances.
My name is Adi Armando. I'm from Indonesia, and I'm part of the larger group which promote freedom of expression in our emerging democracy. But one of the questions which oftenly raised when we are trying to convince people to accept this idea of freedom of expression is that how can you defend what is happening in the Western Europe, where there is law which punish people who what do you call it? Holocaust denial?
Holocaust denial, yes.
Yeah.
No, look, what happens anytime you violate freedom of speech, if you send David Irving to prison in Austria for Holocaust denial, that becomes a justification for others also to deny freedom of speech. And so one of the reasons it seems to me so important not to permit that kind of violation of freedom of speech is it's important intrinsically, but it's also important because any precedent of that sort is used as a justification for other denials of freedom of expression. So I have nothing but contempt for David Irving, but I would certainly oppose his prosecution and his punishment in Austria. I think that was a significant violation of freedom of speech.
Can I have second question? It's about Indonesia. I think it was 10 years ago, we had this conflict between the Muslim and the Christian groups in a part of Indonesia. And at that time, we know that there was a local Christian radio which spread hatred toward Muslims, and also others, the Muslim station radio, which promote hatred toward Christians. During that time, the government did not do anything, and I think it is related with the fact that we at that time accept the idea of freedom of expression. There is no monopoly at that time?
I think there were other explanations for the government not doing anything at that time.
Yes, of course. But, well, in introspection right now, the question will be, if I'm part of like Indonesian Broadcasting Commission, should I or should we do something about it in relation with this idea of hatred speech? Or because there is monopoly, the two sides have their own media.
Yeah,
what do you think about it?
The two sides did have their own media in that circumstance, and I'm not an expert on what took place in Indonesia in that period, but my impression is that those were circumstances in which there was not general freedom of expression, that there was essentially only the communications by the opposing sides, that there were groups that traveled to different islands in the Indonesian archipelago specifically for the purpose of inciting violence, and that the particular circumstances lent themselves to actually getting the violence that they espoused. And so it's difficult in those circumstances to defend the people who were engaged in that from a standpoint of freedom of speech. That was not a general freedom of speech circumstance. I don't know if it was equivalent to Rwanda or Bosnia, but I think it was more on that side of the spectrum than, let's say, the side of the spectrum of contemporary Europe.
Thank you. My name is Ammar Abarkoub. I'm a Master Global Journalism student in Oslo University. I'm from Palestine. I think there is no problem